Welcome to the Florida Peanut Podcast. I'm Noah Walker here at All Things Visual Marketing in Lake City, Florida. And joining us in studio today is Laura Fowler-Goss, Executive Director and Fearless Leader of the Florida Peanut Federation. And joining us today, we have Dr. Barry Tillman, who is a Professor of Agronomy and the Interim Director of the North Florida REC Research and Education Centers for IFAS. Welcome, Dr. Tillman. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Tillman. No, I want to tell you, when I came into this position, there were about 3 people, and they said, if you want to know anything about peanuts, here are the people you call. And he was on that list.
Well, in our pre-interview,
if you want to know anything about peanuts,
I said, I can see why.
You called Tillman, and here he is.
Well, here he is. And welcome and thank you for joining us today. How about just give us a little background of yourself and how you got to be one of the people that people point to whenever you want to know about peanuts.
All right, sure, Noah. So yeah, I began here at the University of Florida in 2004 as an assistant professor, and I came here from actually a rice breeding job. I worked in the rice industry for about 10 years out in Texas, and so plant breeding is my field. We develop in this field we develop new varieties for farmers to grow, for farmers to be able to have higher yield, better quality, better disease resistance, all those things we're trying to put into one single plant that farmers can grow. And so I've done that in my whole career, and I switched from rice into peanut, and really have enjoyed working in the peanut side of things. So in 2004, I joined here at the North Florida REC in Marianna, is where I live and work. And that program actually has existed since the 1970s. My predecessor, Dr. Gorbett, started there in the 1970s, developing the program. At that time, there were actually 2 breeders, peanut breeders in the University of Florida system. He was there in Marianna. There was another in Gainesville, and the program there in Gainesville is where it all started in the 1920s. There were roots back 100 years ago in this program. So it's really neat history to follow through, and the program has had many successes throughout its 100-year history. Varieties that have occupied tens of thousands of acres every year for 20 years. One of those called Flow Runner, that variety, at least in the 1970, was a dominant variety for many years. The program developed what's called the high oleic trait. The high oleic varieties are oil quality that makes the peanuts last longer on the shelf, and they're able to last weeks longer and still taste good after weeks in storage compared to the normal type. So that's an important thing for part of the industry that uses peanuts. They're mainly in the candy industry, so M&Ms and Hershey bars and things like that use those types of high oleic peanuts. The normal oleic peanuts are very valuable as well, and the peanut butter manufacturers use those. So that trait was something that we developed at the University of Florida before I came here. So I'm kind of a long line of breeders and researchers working in this area.
Yeah. Well, in our pre-interview, you also talked about your introduction to that history and finding some artifacts from the program. Talk to us a little bit more about the history and the processes of how they did the research and the recordings of their findings and how that relates today and how it's progressed over time.
And UF is a founder in peanut research, right? Is that true?
That's right, Laura. Yes. So the breeding program beginning in the 1920s is actually the first in the country to actually use more, at that time, modern breeding techniques, meaning crossing two plants together to make hybrids and select new varieties from among those hybrids. So that was an innovation that UF was leading in the peanut world at that time. And yeah, back in the 20s, Noah, to your question about archiving, when we're developing new varieties, we're testing thousands of new plants every year. And there has to be an accurate record keeping system to keep track of all those things. And of course, nowadays we use modern computers and databases, and we can, print barcode labels and keep everything straight from that standpoint. It's a very important part of a breeding program to be able to track all that data. But back in the 20s, we found we have the history of the program written down on these little 4x6 index cards from the 1920s. The breeders, have written their notes on there, the pedigrees of the varieties that they were crossing, and notes about the disease resistance. Yeah, it is pretty cool, and it's all there. We brought it back to Mariana, so we have the entire written history in terms of the field history of the breeding program from the 1920s until the present day.
That's awesome. This made me think of something. I wrote down record keeping, which is critically important, versus time in the field versus thinking. The researcher, you split up your time. I mean, because you've got to have, some solitude there to come up with the cool new things to do, but you also have to work with the plants and the seeds, and you also have to take dadgum accurate notes to keep it all straight.
Yeah, and if you're constantly moving, how do you take time to deduce the outcomes that you need to deduce to move the research forward?
Now, that's a great question, and the real answer is I have a great team of people working with me and for me. So, I have at any one time 1 or 2 graduate students employed in the program working on research areas, questions that we have that we're trying to answer for the industry, for the program, and really for the whole of the system and the peanut economy. And so then I have full-time staff who've been with me for, in some cases, 20 years.
Awesome.
They're well trained. I have a new postdoc working with me now who is replacing a retiree who's been there for 25 years. So a great team of people help to keep all this straight. I can't do it myself by any means. So my job is kind of the chief motivator, I guess you'd say, and trying to keep everything on track with a lot of moving pieces. But I have a great team of people who manage the database, who help count all the seeds to get them planted, and everything in between, as well as harvesting. So it is definitely a team effort, not an individual effort.
Awesome. We expected such, but it still takes quite a leader to bring it all together.
Absolutely. Let's move on to what the outcomes of your research and practice are there to perform, right? So what are the characteristics that you're looking to improve in peanuts and peanut varieties through your research?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of our targets are those targets that are going to benefit farmers. Our growers, when they grow a peanut crop, the way that they get paid is on the tonnage that they deliver to the buying point and the quality of that tonnage. So we're looking at what we call yield, the pounds of peanuts per acre that a farmer harvests. That really is the number one trait that we're breeding for. And that means that we have to test these new varieties and new lines over multiple years and multiple locations before we have the data to be able to make a decision that one is better than the other, because there's a lot of variability from the soil type and the seasons, and all that goes into that. Farmers are, our farmers are in Florida are growing peanuts all the way from western New Pensacola all the way down to Levy County, Florida, and everywhere in between, and even some cases further south than that. So there's a lot of territory that they need to be adapted to. So yield is one of those. The quality factors are like what we call grade. And it really is how many peanuts are they harvesting, not just the shells, because we sell the peanuts in the shell, but what percentage of that is actually peanuts? Because that's what is valuable to it. And then, of course, disease resistance. Farmers are, at least in peanut, farmers have a large expense in trying to control diseases. With fungicides and with management practices. And so just trying to help reduce that cost by breeding disease resistance everywhere. Those would be the main targets.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's a whole package deal that really has to come together. What's the timeline on a seed getting your stamp of approval of being ready to go on 20,000 acres?
Yeah, good question. So when we start the program, let's say making a cross. So we decide we have 2 parents. We want to make a cross between those 2 parents to develop a new variety from. They may have complementary characteristics that we're trying to put together into one new plant. Let's say we start that in year 1. At about year 8, maybe 9 or 10, we're ready to make a decision to release that variety. And then it's another couple of years of seed increase. So it really is, from the time we make a cross to start a new variety, it's 12 years before a farmer would be able to grow that seed of that variety.
Commitment, Dr. Tillman. Oh my goodness. And then how long until that phases out because something better comes along? 15 or 20 years? I mean, like another every 12 years?
Could be
grapes
like
rolls?
4 years.
How does that go?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it really depends on how good the current variety is. So I mentioned the Flow Runner variety earlier. It was in the market for over 20 years. That's the dominant variety. And that's because it was so good that it took us a long time to find something that was better. Turns out that a specific disease came into the market into the industry in about the mid 90s, and it actually is what caused Flow Runner to be knocked off that 20-year pedestal of production.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it happens over some time. We have a current variety now in the market that's been there for almost 20 years, and it's really a strong variety, and none of us have been able to find something better than. But we're working hard on that, and I think there will be some new things in the near future that are better than that.
And Dr. Tillman, I just remembered at the Peanut Field Day at the Swanee Valley Center, there's a tea something or other, and I was so excited because I thought the tea and the variety name was for Tillman. And then you said it was for tomato spotted wilt. And I thought to myself, I'm still going to call it Tillman. What is that? And do you know what I'm talking about, first of all? Because oftentimes people don't.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where in the process is that? And when I'm just generally a very enthusiastic person. So when does the excitement kick in for you? In the beginning, in the middle, or closer to it being published, or whatever you call when it goes out to market?
Yeah, there are kind of several points of excitement through the process when you first see the data from the first yield test and say, wow, this looks really good. And then you test it the next year and, oh, it's not so good. So there's these ups and downs, but over time you find those lines that do well almost every year. And so we released T61 because it has better tomato spotted wilt virus resistance. And that's a big problem in much of our production area. That disease is still problematic. Even after we found resistance to it, it's still a problem for growers in many areas. And so, that excitement, then I think the next step is once we start growing the larger scale, I'm really excited to see and interested to see how it does for growers, in their field. Because that is the true litmus test. We have lots of our small plot data and on-farm tests, but how are they really able to benefit from it? So that's kind of the last excitement point.
That's a good point there too. So what I was just kind of thinking about was, how what we've heard over the last year in doing this podcast is that a lot of the costs and inputs for fungicides and for the defensive aspects for a grower are all through the roof. So a lot of the work that you do, even though it might be slower to the market, is really good defensive work for the future of these farmers and making sure that their product that they're producing is good and sustainable in the field and can really help them hold off some of these rising costs over time.
Right.
How else does your work and your research directly relate to the producers and their outcomes that come to market?
Yeah, so I think disease resistance is still a really big one, but there are other things. We have some. Even though we released T61 as a spotted wilt resistant variety, we have some new ones that are even better, and they're close to release. I'm really excited about that because it's a cost for growers, and we're losing some of the fungicides and insecticides that growers rely on, and especially in the spotted wilt area, we might lose an insecticide that they rely on. So these new varieties would really impact and help there. Another area is we talked about the quality a little bit, the high oleic and the normal oleic. Those are important for parts of the industry that need the different types. Grade is also critical for growers, having more valuable peanuts to sell. And I think in the future, who knows what quality characteristics might be available to growers underneath in the industry. So we're exploring other types of quality enhancements as well. But they're not as important really on a day-to-day basis as others really three big things: yield rate and disease resistance.
Nice. So really what to, I guess, summarize that in my mind is that your work, whenever it comes to the producers putting it into play, helps them grow more, grow better, and then grow a more marketable product across different industry sectors, like with the different types of oil peanuts you were talking in our pre-interview about. Some of them are better for candy peanuts or peanuts that go into candy, and then some of them are better for, say, your peanut butter or direct to consumer use. So it's phenomenal.
It's really cool to think of it coming full circle. Mm-hmm. The work Dr. Tillman's doing, plus or minus 12 years, when Anne-Marie graduates high school, that the peanut butter that she eats will be a reflection of the work he's doing today, right. And when she feeds her baby peanuts to be sure they don't grow up allergic, it's going to be thanks to the folks on his team and others that are doing that same kind of work. The science of it all is too much for me. We were talking about genetic markers to track trees. I wrote it down because it's going to make me sound smart one day.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit in the pre-interview as well. Yeah, but you can really dive, and we'll probably have to have 2 or 3 other episodes with you if we can siphon off that much of your time. But to really dive down into how you guys mark out these what is valuable in the genetics of these plants, and then how you select either the plants or the genes to replicate, and then what that looks like. Are they all clones, or are they all biological descendants? What is it? It's all very fascinating.
It is incredible. What did you call it? Big brain.
Big brain. Yeah, it's very big brain stuff. Bigger brain than my brain. Well, Dr. Tillman, we appreciate you sharing with us. Is there anything else that we should know, or producers or consumers of peanuts should know today about what you do, or anything that's coming down the line for them?
Maybe just in general, I think plant breeding as a whole is a really maybe unknown field, but almost every plant that someone touches, whether it's a vegetable or a house plant that you might buy in Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever you might do your shopping in a gardening store, they're a product of a plant breeder's work somewhere in this country or the world. So I think it's a really interesting field. Not a lot of people get into it, but I would be remiss not to point out that it's an exciting thing for young people to maybe think about doing as a career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how you feel about these 2 words, but go Gators on being the oldest and what's the most established breeding and research facility and institution in this field.
That's right.
And go Dr. Tillman for leading the way in North Florida. So, yeah, great. Well, I've been Noah Walker with the Florida Peanut Podcast. This has been Laura Fowler-Goss, Executive Director of the Florida Peanut Federation. And today we were taught a lot by Dr. Barry Tillman, the interim director of the North Florida REC under IFAS and an agronomy professor. Thank you very much, Dr. Tillman. We hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.